Sunday, May 1st, lesson number 6, ABRAMS Departure. Genesis 12, 1-9 says, Now the Lord said to Abram, Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. So Abram went forth as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Now Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took Sarah his wife, and Lot his nephew, and all their possessions which they had accumulated, and the persons which they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. Thus they came to the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. Now the Canaanite was then in the land. The Lord appeared to Abraham and said, To your descendants I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord, who appeared to him. Then he proceeded from there to the mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. Abram journeyed on, continuing toward the Negev. Why did God call Abraham to leave his country and family? How did Abram respond? The last time that God had spoken with a person, at least as recorded in Scripture, it was with Noah, to reassure him after the flood that he would establish a covenant with all flesh, Genesis 9:15-17, and that another worldwide flood would never come. God's new word, now to Abram, reconnects with that promise. All nations of the earth will be blessed through Abram. The fulfillment of that prophecy begins with leaving the past. Abram leaves all that is familiar to him, his family, his country, even a part of himself. The intensity of this going is reflected in the repetition of the keyword go, which occurs 7 times in this context. Abram has first to leave his country, Ur of the Chaldeans, which is also Babylonia, Genesis 11:31, Isaiah 13:19. The call to go out of Babylon has a long history among the biblical prophets, Isaiah 48:20, Revelation 18:4. Abram's departure also concerns his family. Abram must leave his heritage and much of what he learned and acquired through heredity, education, and influence. Yet, God's call to go involves even more. The Hebrew phrase leka, go, translated literally, means go yourself or go for yourself. Abram's departure from Babylon concerns more than his environment or even his family. The Hebrew phrase suggests an emphasis on himself. Abram has to leave himself to get rid of the part of himself that contains his Babylonian past. The goal of this abandonment is a land that God will show him. The same language will be used again in the context of the sacrifice of Isaac, Genesis 22:2, to refer to the Mount of Moriah, where Isaac will be offered and where the Jerusalem temple will be built, 2 Chronicle 3:1. God's promise is not just about a physical homeland, but about the salvation of the world. This idea is reaffirmed in God's promise of the blessing for all nations, Genesis 12:2-3. The verb barak, bless, appears 5 times in this passage. This universal blessing for all people will come through the seed of Abraham, Genesis 22:18, 26:4, and 28:14. The text refers here to the seed that will ultimately be fulfilled in Jesus Christ, Acts 3:25. What might God be calling you to leave behind? That is, what part of your life might you have to abandon in order to heed the call of God? From the book Patriarchs and Prophet, pages 125 to 127, it says, "It was no light test that was thus brought upon Abraham, no small sacrifice that was required of him. There were strong ties to bind him to his country, his kindred, and his home. But he did not hesitate to obey the call. He had no question to ask concerning the land of promise, whether the soil was fertile and the climate healthful, whether the country afforded agreeable surroundings and would afford opportunities for amassing wealth. God has spoken, and his servant must obey. The happiest place on earth for him was the place where God would have him to be." Many are still tested, as was Abraham. They do not leave, or rather they do not hear the voice of God speaking directly from the heavens, but he calls them by the teachings of his word and the events of his providence. They may be required to abandon a career that promises wealth and honor, to leave congenial and profitable associations and separate from kindred, to enter upon what appears to be only a path of self-denial, hardship, and sacrifice. God has a work for them to do, but a life of ease and the influence of friends and kindred would hinder the development of the very traits essential for its accomplishment. He calls them away from human influences and aid, and leads them to feel the need of his help, and to depend upon him alone, that he may reveal himself to them. Who is ready at the call of providence to renounce cherished plans and familiar associations? Who will accept new duties and enter untried fields, doing God's work with firm and willing hearts, for Christ's sake, counting his losses gain? He who will do this has the faith of Abraham, and will share with him that far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. 2 Corinthians 4:17.